import gas, of which around 45% is provided from Qatar, which is, of course, now very difficult to get. If you don't have, don't put enough investment in trying to figure out how much gas reserves we have, right? And that's very slow. We don't do coal gasification, liquefaction. We don't have data centers for AI. We have none of that. That's the future of the world. Where are we there?
Well, I think in the rightly fixed on our huge energy dependence.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to point out a couple of countries that come to mind. South Korea, Taiwan, they have a high level of, let's say, the oil, hydrocarbon-related dependence abroad.
Of course, the depreciation pressures and rising yields, which is not a good combination. So all capital of all hues has been going out. So this was only on the financial account side. What has happened is that amidst all this, the oil shock arrives.
Yes.
And that affects your current account also. So the current account was actually quite well behaved. It's not even 1% of GDP. And India has been comfortably been able to finance up to 2.5% of GDP. That's the threshold, accepted threshold before investors start losing confidence. So that is increasing the troubles on the other side as well. So
it's not inconsistent what you said, that you can have growth and yet you don't have growth of employment because your labor supply is growing so much and the growth is not picking it up because a lot of the growth is happening in sectors like financial services, IT-enabled services. They don't employ much. They employ high-end people. So we are having both. I mean, yes, we are growing at 6% and so forth. That also will take a shock now.
I'm doubtful about the number also, but anyway, let's not get into that debate.
But meanwhile, your unemployment numbers are growing up and it's not open unemployment in a country like India, it's mainly underemployment, for which the data is very fragile. So to me, that is also a very, very, issue of great concern.
The forward book. So somehow that break has to happen. I'm not sure as to only the rupee adjustment will bring about a rebalancing. I think a bit of compression will be necessary. Whether you do it through, checking imports on the current account side because to accommodate the oil import bill.
Then people will say you are trying to
alter prices. Well, that's on residents, so it does not dent as long as the restrictions are on residents' outflows. So, as an individual, I can remit say 250,000. Let me not use all this because I don't want to set off a scare.
Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll talk about the Indian economy, where it is, why, and what's the reason for being where it is. What's the impact of the Middle East crisis, the war with Iran, on the Indian economy? Why is the rupee falling? What are the pitfalls that lie ahead? The nature of the global economy is changing. Artificial intelligence is the new technology which will take over the economic system in the world and how nations deal with each other. There will be a new kind of dominance because of artificial intelligence by those countries where companies actually own the intellectual property rights. How are we going to deal with that? And how is the situation, the geopolitical situation, what Trump is doing, the problems in the Strait of Hormuz, the fact that we've not been able to get oil, the fact that the United States has just granted permission for another month of India being allowed to buy oil from Russia. All these issues are very significant for us. But most worrying is the fact that there is no real growth that is happening, and the future of growth of the Indian economy is, according to me, suspect. Actually, there are economists who may differ with me, but I am, as a politician, when I look at the ground reality of India, I see rising unemployment. I see lack of skills. I see the education sector in the doldrums. I see basic health services not being provided enough funding. I see paper leaks throughout. Vice chancellors being appointed by the government who belong to a political ideology. So the domestic situation, which impacts the economy, as I have mentioned, is quite worrisome. But apart from that, the more worrisome part is that we don't have a plan for the future. How are we going to meet the global challenges of tomorrow? How are we going to meet inflation? How are we going to meet the flight of capital from this country? How are we going to meet the negative FDI flows into this country? All that has serious consequences on the future of India. And we're going to discuss some of these issues with three extraordinary people with us. First of all, Shankaracharya, thank you very much. You've been here before, and thank you for coming again. BA Honours Economics from Oxford, PhD from Harvard, World Bank, returned to India in 1982, economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance in 85, 93 to 2001, chief economic advisor, 97 to 2000, member of SEBI, member of the 12th Finance Commission, member of the National Security, NSAB, 2009 to 2013, honorary professor at ICRIAR, and chairman of the Central University of Andhra. And of course, you've written several books on the Indian economy. So thank you very much. Sudipto, thanks a lot for being here. You've also been here with me before. Chairman of the Board of Governors at the Center for Development Studies. Also a non-resident fellow of the National Council of Applied Economic Research. PhD from Delhi School of Economics. Fulbright Scholar at Yale University. Joan Robinson Memorial Fellow at King's College, Cambridge, my God, and of course several significant positions, including member of the 14th Finance Commission, and I could go on and on and on. Thank you very much for being here. Renu, thank you for coming. You're here for the first time. Prominent economist with deep expertise in macroeconomic policy, capital flows, monetary policy, exchange rate management, and the intersections of climate change with economic issues. Currently, you serve as a senior fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress in New Delhi, PhD in economics from the University of Sussex. Professional career spans central banking, international institutions, think tanks, and you've served the Reserve Bank of India for almost 21 years, more than 21 years, before you sort of went to the IMF. So, thank you. Let me start with you, Shankar. Where are we, and where are we going as an economy?
Well, your introduction, I think, touched on so many issues, made me feel that I, who am generally regarded as a pessimist, am a rank optimist compared to you. But, no, I mean, obviously, one can't go into all the issues at the same time. There are too many big ones. But to answer your question in a short way, I would say that to some extent, I think we've been slowing on kind of basic macro, particularly the external sector management, forward movement on reforms, whether it's bilateral investment treaties, which were promised 15 months ago in the government's budget, but nothing happened, or complete reform of
There's a lot of criticism on the bilateral investment treaty.
Well,
Sujit Bhalla wrote a very nice piece in the Express the other day.
Yeah. A lot of people have, but point is, it was promised in the speech in February 1 of 2025, as was an overall review of the entire customs tariff structure. Yes. We are a bit on the high side, as you know, there. Just giving examples. So, I mean, I think the sort of reform bandwagon, insofar as it was there, has slowed against a background where you've got the hegemonic power in the world going kind of unpredictable, shall we say, to put it at a polite way, and going very anti-multilateralism, anti the sort of liberal trading order, and all those things. And on top of that, you've now got the sort of the West Asian war since February. Actually, that's the second West Asian war. In June last year, you had one. So, as you well know, the resulting energy shock to the world, most experts say this is the biggest one we've had since the Second World War. And so it's not a nice place for pretty much every country at the moment. And we are certainly not in a good one. Turning back to I think the external sector, if I may just make a couple of points. If you look at what was happening to our merchandise exports, goods exports, they were doing pretty well up to 2013, 14, thereabouts. Sort of share of GDP was about 16, 17%. By 10 years later, almost now, it had come down to about 12%. So that's a big drop. And we sort of paid not much attention in policy terms, as far as I can tell, because we were lulled by the growth of the service exports, which were very buoyant and perhaps continue to be, though I'm a bit doubtful.
After AI, maybe they'll...
Yeah, that's what AI is a big kind of potential danger. Yeah. So, and in the last 2 years, as you mentioned, the whole FDI side has got very weak. Net investment has been zero or negative.
That's correct.
And so against that background, kind of managing the external sector, which is important to overall management of the economy, is, I think, getting tougher.
It is a follow-up question. You see, energy is at the heart of economic development.
Yeah.
Access to energy. If you import 88.6% of your oil, if you import gas, of which around 45% is provided from Qatar, which is, of course, now very difficult to get. If you don't have, don't put enough investment in trying to figure out how much gas reserves we have, right? And that's very slow. We don't do coal gasification, liquefaction. We don't have data centers for AI. We have none of that. That's the future of the world. Where are we there?
Well, I think you rightly fixed on our huge energy dependence.
Yes.
But I'd just like to point out a couple of countries that come to mind. South Korea, Taiwan, they have a high level of, let's see, the oil, hydrocarbon-related dependence abroad. But they're doing pretty well because precisely they've got into the right sectors long ago. That's one. The other is, I think, our inability to find domestic hydrocarbon resources here, I think, I can't prove it, but I think has been damaged by, if you like, populism of wanting to keep all these prices as low as possible. Mm-hmm. You remember our famous administered price mechanism, which was allegedly liberalized in late 90s, early 2000s. It's all back there now.
Right.
So against that background, I don't think you got the kind of investment through our OMCs and our ONGC and so on, which one could have otherwise hoped for if they were always starved for funds whenever the prices went up. Mm. Keep the petrol pump price down, don't let them make profits. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Sudipto, are the fundamentals of the Indian economy strong?
Yes and no. There's some things on which things are okay, but there are other things where we are very fragile, and I think the most fragile is exactly what you and Shankar have just been talking about, the
energy sector.
Energy and the external sector. In our trade, for instance, people who want to focus on the good news will tell you that 80% of our trade doesn't, is fairly diversified. But 20% trade in this one country, which then you look at oil. Everybody says the Gulf, the Hormuz, 20% of global. It's not 20 for us. It's 45%. After reduction, it's a little less than 30. But it's still very, so our exposure to all these fragile things that, is affecting global economy is much more intense than, the global picture suggests. So that is our most fragile point externally. Internally, my main concern is that we have had growth. You were questioning the growth numbers. It's not inconsistent what you said, that you can have growth and yet we don't have growth of employment because, your labor supply is growing so much and the growth is not picking it up because a lot of the growth is happening in sectors like, financial services, IT-enabled services. They don't employ much. They employ high-end people. So we are having both. I mean, yes, we are growing at 6% and so forth. That also will take a shock now.
I'm doubtful about the number also. But anyway, let's not get into that debate.
But meanwhile, your unemployment numbers are growing up, and it's not open unemployment in a country like India. It's mainly underemployment, for which the data is very fragile. So to me, that is also a very, very, issue of great concern.
But do we take into account what is happening in the informal sector? Because we don't have access to those numbers. So how do you really predict what's really happening to the Indian economy in the context? Because you take the organized sector and extrapolate. Don't you do that?
But that's what we used to do, you're absolutely right. And it made no sense.
Yeah.
But the good news on that is that now
has not just started.
The Statistics Ministry, and it has been under good management in the last couple of years, they have started annual surveys of this unorganized sector. So it won't be a black box as much as it used to be. But a lot of this problem of employment that I'm talking about is really there. I mean, they account for the bulk of the workforce in this
the
country.
fact that people are moving back to the villages. This is what's happening today. But what are the fundamental strengths of our economy? Let's not be pessimistic, as he said.
The strengths, I would say, are, I think we are a fairly diversified economy, including services sector. I am one of those who thinks actually this growth of the service sector has been a good thing, because that's where you've got jobs, not in the formal sector, not in the, but in the informal service sector.
Right.
That's been one of the major absorbers of employment. So the informal sector is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's also there as a shock absorber when things go wrong. Along with agriculture, people fall back because they have nowhere else to go. But there are other strengths. We do have a very diversified industrial base, which we all complain today about, Nehruvian policy and so on. But partly because of that, we do have, a very diversified industrial base, which not many countries in the world have.
That's true.
We have now a very robust agricultural sector. Do you remember those days when there was ship to mouth? We were begging for food outside. Today we have so much grain, we don't know what to do with it. And
the farmers are very unhappy.
They're very happy, but there are a lot of policy distortions there, which we need to fix. I mean, that's another area which we can go into later. But I mean, I don't think we should be producing so much of rice and wheat.
And we should allow exports. We should allow exports.
And sugarcane for that matter. These are the biggest water guzzling crops. And we put all our incentives to encourage the sectors growing there. So there are mixed strengths and weaknesses of the system.
Reno, so capital outflows, capital inflows, it seems as if a lot of money is moving out of this country. Why is that? Are investors losing confidence in the Indian economy?
Let me just rewind a few years back, like last couple of years, and in the case of FDI, even a little more. then that, and then the current shock, which is the oil crisis trigger. So there has been an exodus and a regular exodus of foreign capital from the country. Net FDI has been actually under 1% of GDP, and in fact virtually 0.5 or even less in the last 2 years. This compares with something like we have touched 3.8, 3.6% of GDP pre-crisis, and as I think until 2011-12 or so. So that has been a very big concern. Gross inflows may have been coming in, but what is staying in is not much, which is net FDI. On the short-term side, the exodus of capital is colliding with a series of unfortunate coincidences, as it were. Some of them are actually structural, and some of them might be cyclical. Now, if I just look at the cyclical factors, then it's just a pure risk-reward trade-off, risk-return trade-off, which the investors are seeing. Currently, the AI mania is such in the last 1 year particularly that portfolio rebalancing has accelerated a lot of outflows out of our stock markets. And that is also linked to the fact that Indian stock market has been very highly overvalued, as it were. So if you look at the fact that it's a very expensive market and the returns that the prospectors, investors see do not justify that kind of risk taking, and the alternative prospects are so much better. So capitals have been flowing into countries which are investing in AI, and there is a future. The prospective returns are higher, so United States, Korea, Taiwan, and so on. So and even China. So India has been suffering on that count. The other count has been a very excessively high valuations. So despite the fact that there have been corrections in the stock market, obviously it's not enough to alter the incentives for the short-term capital to come back. And third is, of course, the depreciation pressures and rising yields, which is not a good combination. So all capital of all hues has been going out. So this was only on the financial account side. What has happened is that amidst all this, the oil shock arrives.
Yes.
And that affects your current account also. So the current account was actually quite well behaved. It's not even 1% of GDP.
Right.
And India has been comfortably been able to
shape.
finance up to 2.5% of GDP before. That's the threshold, accepted threshold, before investors start losing confidence. So that is increasing the troubles on the other side as well. So the pressure is there. It's reflected in the currency. It's not that the rupee was not under pressure earlier. It has been actually under depreciation pressures for the last two years, or a bit more perhaps.
Actually,
but it's
22,
accelerated
23.
now.
22, 23
Absolutely.
is around 80,
Yes.
82, and
Yeah.
today it's 90,
So it's been a
96.8.
kind of a drip depreciation pressure, but it was emerging only from the deficit of capital, because even that small, narrow current account gap, just about 0.5% of GDP, India was unable to finance that. And that's been a shocker in the sense, it's very astonishing, because typically India's always had crisis triggered from a BOP crisis from the current account side. So for the last this year, if we include that, India is going to have a net BOP deficit, which is a drawdown of your reserves. Now that to me seems the biggest pressure point as of now. If you look at it from a management perspective, macroeconomic management, that's something which requires immediate attention, near-term stabilization, and fundamentally, I think it needs to be recognized that these geoeconomic shocks are here to stay. I think the biggest alarm bell or the warning or a caution was sounded when during Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 22. And leave aside COVID, that was a natural catastrophe, once in a century kind of shock. But subsequently, we just find that all of them are the shocks to all countries across the world globally are geoeconomic in nature. They're related to trade, tariffs, sanctions, conflicts, and usage of these, whatever leverage countries have, and most recently the Strait of Hormuz closure. So that's these are the constellation of events.
We knew when the war started on February 28 that this is going to happen, right? We should have had enough oil reserves And at the moment, they say we've got, what, 22 months of oil reserves? That's what they're saying.
There are various
Or
reports,
8 weeks,
but
some say
like
8
the
weeks.
official press conferences, which are weekly, that's what
countries
they say.
like China, countries like Japan have huge reserves.
China is something like I read,
6
I think
months.
it
So-
can
so
basically go through
we
entire 2026
We
through that.
never prepared our economy to this kind of shock. We should have done that, number one. Number two, and I want to come to you, Shankar, now. Rupee is 96.8. People say it's going to touch 100 because we've been shoring up, RBI has been shoring up the rupee for some time now. But now some economists say let it slide, and if you let it slide, what's going to happen? Your import bill is going to increase. Your current account deficit is going to grow. Exports that you talk about are in fact impeded by tariffs. Your textile sector, your gem sectors, and many of the other sectors are impacted. Exports down, imports up, inflation will rise. Where are we going to go?
Well, before we get to that, because that I think is fairly gloomy, but I want to emphasize what Renu was saying, that we got used to a weak current account in the balance of payments, basically goods and services trade and remittances and so forth. We had our initial shocks of, say, or earlier shocks of 70s and then 91 in the current account.
That's
Capital account wasn't that important then. I think the distinguishing feature of what's going on here, to my mind, is that we have had a pretty healthy capital account until 2 years ago. And that has turned. Now, there's a whole set of reasons one can go into on that. But that's the new factor. And with the energy shock, which is essentially petroleum gas imports, we are now in a double bind, that they're both hitting at the same time.
Yes.
And we haven't actually experienced that ever. And this is going to be tougher to get out of for that reason alone. And the fact that we kind of didn't take early warning signals, whether it was stagnation of exports or for FDI turning slowly from positive 2.5% of GDP to almost zero and so on. Now, what we should have done is a different set of arguments, but I think that's what's really going to make, one of the big things that's going to make it tough. And if we don't follow through on policy announcements which are important, like the bilateral investment treaty overhaul and so on for FDI, we lose credibility, externally. And I think credibility at this point in time is very
low.
important. It's very important to maintain credibility. Now, how you do it is also not an easy thing at all. And I'm not sure that...
It's not considered an investment destination, quite frankly.
Yeah.
This is the problem.
No, that's right.
Right? And therefore, in fact, the confidence in the economy, in the Indian economy, which I found about 10 years, 15 years ago, that's slowly declining. Is that right?
As I jokingly say, we always say that India is in the sweet spot. Now we find the sweet spot is actually between a rock and a hard place for us. Because we've been caught. But as you were saying, a country like us with so much exposure on our energy imports, we should be building huge reserves, of several months. And because, there was no fire, we didn't take precautionary action in advance, and now we are in the middle of it. And now talking about building reserves and so on. So this need to be a little bit forward-looking in a policy.
You need structural changes in the economy, don't you?
A lot of reforms, as he was saying, we've gone back. And the other thing is we do things which you cannot do. You're talking about exchange rate. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you may not have a choice. I mean,
you don't have a choice, I think.
If people in the world believe that, they should take money out of India, can't stop it, it will pull down the... So you have to let it find its level, and I don't think it has yet. Because the forward markets, there's still a positive premium. It's when the spot market oil more or less are the same, then you know that you found your equilibrium. We still have some way to go, maybe 100, maybe more than 100, who knows. But you don't have a choice. It's not a matter of whether you like it or not. You have to learn to live with it.
Or if it goes to 100, 105, people will start importing stuff. Yeah,
So
we'll
I
have
was
to do
going
that. We'll
say
have no
that
choice
it's
in the
actually a
matter.
good thing. It's actually
Whether good or bad, I'm just saying that's the
yeah,
consequence.
it's a corrective mechanism. People will import less, but our exports will become cheaper.
And luckily, we have demand in the country, so therefore, that itself will somewhat fuel the economy.
yeah.
That's perhaps the only. But okay. Let me ask you. I think I'm not an economist, but any country to grow needs three things: capital, and technology, right? And human resource. Human resource, capital, technology. How are we today in terms of these three things as a nation?
Capital, okay, let me start with that. But if I may, with your permission, just add to
Yeah,
supplement
please.
what
No, that's the whole purpose
Sudipto
of this conversation.
was
yeah.
talking about Rupee finding. I have a slightly different take on that, which is that the most important thing, according to me, at this point, what the policymakers must do is break the expectation spiral. There is, frankly, a depreciation expectation spiral. The market knows, everyone knows that the RBI's reserves are committed. Forward market, there's a building book. It's, $100 billion at last count, at least 2 months ago. We don't know the latest data. Then it clamped down on the banks on the open positions. Obviously, it wasn't interested in more of the forward, running up a forward book. So somehow that break has to happen. I'm not sure as to only the rupee adjustment will bring about a rebalancing. I think a bit of compression will be necessary. Whether you do it through, checking imports on the current account side, because to accommodate the oil import bill.
But then people will say you're trying
alter
to
prices. Well, that's on residents, so it does not dent as long as the restrictions are on residents' outflows. So, as an individual, I can remit say $250,000. Let me not use all this because I don't want to set off a scare. But there are outflows from residents can be. It's the outflows from non-residents which deters investor confidence, as Dr. Acharya said. So now coming back to your question on capital. Yes, you need capital to grow, and India has a very good, as a growing country, it should be running a current account deficit, and it has normally. The point is that has dried up. Unfortunately, even domestic capital, there is a dearth because India's savings rate has been falling. So there is a squeeze. The government runs a deficit, and if you look at it in terms of a flow identity, then if you add up, there's only about, I think, 7.5% of GDP, which is to be allocated between the government, the private sector, and the rest. So if the foreign inflow has squeezed, obviously, there is a huge problem.
and technology.
Right? Mercifully, private sector is not investing, so the pressure has not been so much on interest rates, but it's rising now because the government is. Now, technology, India has always been a technology importer, right? So it's not a big thing that we're now nowhere on technology right now. We can talk about these aspiring to be on the technology frontier, but that has long been occupied by the United States, the global technology frontier, and now increasingly China is reaching there. So India's always been a technology importer as long as the investment, foreign investment or FDI laws, regulations were okay, especially after 1991. Technological know-how and all entered, and India benefited from that FDI and the removal of those restrictions. So I think the technology is available. It can be costly, too costly, or less costly. So that can be actually, if I may add to that, is that technology comes about through innovation. Innovation comes about
And through education.
University
system.
India has the skills, the high level skills for innovations. Unfortunately, it's all in Silicon Valley. The thing is that companies would innovate and look at this thing. If they are compelled to export, you have to compel the private sector to face to the international competitiveness frontier, which can only happen if they export. But unfortunately, we've had 7 years of rising tariffs, and it's the play out. Now we are signing the FTAs. There is a huge turnaround in trade policy. But let's not forget that from after 2017-18, the average tariff rate was rising all the time. So, there was a protection going on. The turnaround has happened only just 2 years ago.
Yes.
So, there's a radical turnaround. So, that's a bit of the policy wavering or uncertainty, I would say. The third thing was
human resources.
Human resources. Yes and no. I think there is, first of all, the demographics is one of the strengths. I may add again to Sudipto's, it's a fundamental strength. So no matter what you say, whether the growth numbers are overstated, understated, misstated, whatever, the fact is, so many, about 10 million of the labor workforce entering into the pool each year does add to growth.
And
right?
they're mostly unemployed.
Yes. So, about 1 to 1.5 percentage point of growth straight away comes from favorable demographics, I would say. So, let's not disregard that or discount that.
Favorable demographics means people have to do something to live, no?
Yeah.
So therefore, it's not the kind of productive
it's not. But
human
that's a
resource
separate
that
matter.
we require as a nation.
That's a separate matter, I would say. That's a separate matter.
I just wanted to start off that
Qualify
discussion. I wanted your reaction on this issue.
Yes, well, we now crossed many territories, but let me pick up on a little bit forward-looking what one should do.
Okay.
And that will also outline the kind of priorities. See, one of the things we haven't talked about is our fiscal weakness. Which is in macro, that's very important.
Yes.
And if you go back in time, there was a COVID shock, and our combined deficit, state and center, went up to 13% of GDP. And I think the finance minister and the prime minister did a very good job of bringing it down to the territory of about 8.5%. But since then, it's sort of hung around there. May have dropped this year, but completed in March to about 7.5 or 8. You don't really know for quite a few months later because the state actuals and all those things don't come in. But that's still a very high fiscal deficit in comparison with other major developing countries. And so that's a weakness, and seen as part of what foreigners, when they look at this economy for investment, they look at the macro fiscal as well.
Yes.
Secondly, in the fiscal domain, we are not adjusting our prices to this huge energy shock, or we're doing it very, very slowly. I'm told, reading the newspapers, that our oil marketing companies are losing 1,000 crores a day because of unadjusted prices. Now, I don't know the numbers, but if they're anywhere near ballpark right, I mean, that's huge, because that means that in a month you're losing 30,000 crores. In a quarter, you're losing about 100,000 crores. Now, obviously,
UPA lost it we lost a lot of that money during our time.
What will happen probably is what the UPA invented, if I may say so, petroleum bonds and these kinds of gimmicks, which we got out of, I have to say, to the credit of this government post-COVID. And I fear they'll come in.
Yeah, but politically it's just not acceptable.
They're adjusting prices.
So you're increasing incrementally the price of. But that's the only way to do it.
That's the only way.
But ultimately you can't increase it to that. But it has a huge
negative
political impact.
I'm not saying you have to cover the whole thing.
Yes.
But if you, again, this is partly a perception confidence issue. If you are seen as not acting to an obvious challenge, then everybody forms a view of your willingness to take hard decisions. And that's part of, policy as perceived from outsiders as well as insiders. So, I mean, you can't encourage a lot of investment, whether it's foreign or domestic.
No, I agree
if you don't do things which you have to do. Now, the other thing on the fiscal, if you notice, because we haven't done the right things or enough of them, what have we done? We reduced excise tariffs on petroleum.
Yes.
Now, you may say, well, 10 rupees, so what? But you haven't raised your prices at the pump by 10 rupees.
Right.
And so what you've done is you've borne this initial shock essentially on the fisc. And of course, implicit in not adjusting prices is that at some point these turn into subsidies. Whether it's petroleum subsidies or petroleum-related subsidies or fertilizer.
So it's okay.
Yeah, no, fertilizer subsidies.
Fertilizer subsidies.
I mean, all governments, if I may say so,
yes,
have not bitten the bullet on that for decades. So all these, I think, add up to, in my view, It's going to be a difficult ride, and while one can point to things one can do, such as do something more on the fisc, such as make use of the free trade arrangements, agreements that you have sort of signed. And may I just point out, we heard a lot about the EU,
Yeah, but I
India.
don't think that's going to come about for some time.
It's not going to come out for at least about around a year.
At least a year.
And the UK one, which a month ago the Commerce Minister was saying going to be signed off in May,
Yes.
which is this month, I read in the papers that there's some issue with steel that has come up, and that so we are balking. So now, this again worries me that you're stalling on something that was almost sewn up, and you have to recognize that even when we get to signing off on these deals, the government has to do a lot of things to help the private sector make use of them. I see no preparation for that.
Why is the private sector not investing?
Private sector, look, for example, you have in the textiles area, you have various kinds of sustainability requirements in the EU, right? Now, to the extent our textile exports, now, a lot of them come from small operators. In fact, we have very few large operators.
Yes.
How are they going to work out what is the sustainable requirement in the chain? What are they going to do with CBAM, the carbon adjustment mechanism problems? That government has to take a forward-looking view and actually do things to make, whether it's labs or testing or whatever available at almost free of cost. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take advantage of these free trade area agreements that we keep hearing about but have gone silent on recently.
So what about the MSME sector? Because this impacts hugely the MSME sector in this country. And that's in doldrums.
MSME sector was saying is earlier that it has been a shock absorber in the sense that they suffer.
They suffer really.
And we make a lot of token announcements. We'll have this scheme, we'll have that, give them some assistance with borrowing and stuff.
Loan guarantees.
Yeah, and all those sorts of things.
Emergency credit.
But actually we don't do it. They're really left on their own. And they are the major source of employment in this country, outside agriculture. So that's a very, very fragile thing. But a couple of things I wanted to mention, what was this being discussed before. There are many things that we can do quietly, even when you're hit by a crisis. But you should do them and not make a big, hoo-ha statement about it. The wrong thing to do is try and create an impression of where everything is fine for whatever political reason, whatever. Then one fine day you hit the market by saying, we must austerity, this, that. There was no need to do this kind of. You could quietly do some of these things because that has created some kind of panic. And whether it's domestic people buying or outsiders saying, this country is in really bad shape. So I think quiet implementation of policies is...
No, but Sudip, though, if you look at the lines in Rajasthan, you look at the, people don't have, petrol stations are not selling petrol. There are people standing in queues all over the country.
Or gas.
Delhi is an exception because they can't afford, you have the Cyprus president here. You can't afford all this to happen in Delhi. But all over the country it's the same.
People lining up with their, gas cylinders, sleeping.
Exactly. What kind of impression does... See, today the world is watching you because the nature of communication technology is such. So the world knows what's happening in the country. That's not good for investment in any case. People don't then start to losing confidence.
Yeah, that business of having trust, which we talked about earlier, is absolutely critical. And once you lose it, it's very difficult to get it back. And I'm afraid we are on a path now. Just before coming here, listening to something that, the negative sentiments about India outside.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying, one of our, investment chaps who goes abroad, he's never seen such negative sentiment abroad in the past 20, 30 years, he was saying. I mean...
No. In fact, 15, 16, 17 years ago, it was not that bad. I mean, people regarded us as an economy which the foreigners wanted to invest in. But that's not the case anymore. That's the sad part. And I don't know. But anyway, I think part of the problem, and I'll start with you and then I seek the views of everybody. Part of the problem is our regulatory mechanisms. Part of the problems are our draconian laws. Part of the problem is the corporate and the capital is flying out because the corporate sector says, I don't want to be here. Some ED will come, some CBI guy will come, and they're watching me over the shoulder. Bureaucrats are afraid of giving their views to the government. You have, bureaucrats, what should I say, just knowing what the boss wants to hear and make sure that he hears what he wants to hear. Now, how can a country progress with this kind of environment? So I think the first thing to do is to get rid of such regulatory mechanisms which are a dampener on growth.
Yeah, so the regulator and the regulatory and the tax side, I mean, we do hear reports and frequent grumbles about tax, dreads and tax demands, unreasonable, reasonable, or otherwise, or so-called tax terrorism that it is regularly reported. At the same time, I think the return is all investment in businesses, whether it's private sector or private domestic or foreign, looks at the rate of return, prospective profits. Obviously, they don't see that here, which includes our own businesses. They're not investing too since like 2010, 11, 12 precisely. Yeah. So they're not investing, and if you see capacity utilization, it has remained stagnant at around 75%. So, if you still have 25%, which is lying unutilized, why would you invest? Yeah. So, obviously, there is the rate of return on the investment does not justify that kind of risk. And if that is the case, then neither foreign nor, and as I said earlier, there is also foreign capital always looks at where else it can go. It's always shopping for returns. So there's been a lot of FDI into Vietnam, for example, in the last few years, because Vietnam has been a stunning story.
That's true.
In terms of, it's the way it's
Bangladesh's rate of growth is 8.3%.
Exactly. The other one is most of the capital has been fleeing to the US, including, direct foreign investments. That's because of the artificial intelligence. Prior to that, it was Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, then Trump tariffs, and so on. So that has happened. So there is, that kind of play out also happening, which also impacts India. So, you have to get up and see what you can do to attract it back. So,
Shankar, what about this regulatory mechanism and these harsh laws? What do you think don't you think?
I think those are a big problem, but historically we've had them before too.
No, but you can have any law. It's a question of how you implement it.
No,
so you could have those laws, but nobody implement them in the manner they do now.
Absolutely. No,
that's the worry.
One hears more stories of this kind of business climate intervention for discretionary purposes of various kinds.
That dampens
I mean, actually, and there, I don't know what's going on, but one has heard of the two separate Mr. Gauba committees that have been set up on various regulations. Now, that's not implementation, I know, but getting rid of various minor regulations which might impede investment.
That's been going on for a long time. Okay. I'm talking about those serious ED raids that take place, the CBI, and people, being sent to prison without any, real evidence against them. So when people around the world see this...
Well, you would know a lot more about that. We are just economists. You're a lawyer.
The reason why I'm asking is because this all relates to our economic growth. Pardon my saying so. All these aspects are fundamental to the desire, to the environment necessary for people wanting to come and invest in this country.
There are actually two. One is that, even the formal regulatory system is quite onerous. And the one thing that business needs, investment for the domestic, is a reliable, stable and business environment, which they don't have. It's very unpredictable.
Even a politically stable environment. Forget business.
Yes.
We need that.
Now, on top of that, the things you were referring to, and I tend to describe it as a predatory, using, weaponizing the regulations we have to, extract rents, what we call rents. That has made it. And why do we, foreigners, why would they come? Even our chaps are going abroad.
1.5 million people, high net worth people have left this country.
Yeah.
And why would they do that if the investment climate was conducive
They
for
have better options
outside?
abroad.
So why would a country...
FDI is also on the rise.
On the rise? Why would a country that's looking at Viksit Bharat do anything like this? This is certainly no way to achieve Viksit Bharat.
One strand of hope.
Yes.
Much of the world is also getting worse.
Yes.
So we have to look at it in
It's a very
positive
difficult
terms.
environment.
No doubt about it. This is like saying that, you used to do it yesterday, I'm doing it today, so it's okay. When I don't care about the rest of the world, I care about my country, We don't want to be America in this regard. We don't want any of that. We don't want the kind of ethnic wars that are taking place in various parts of the world, including Bolivia and Rwanda and all kinds of places, Congo.
We have a completely changing, global environment. Everything is changing.
Yes.
And I don't know whether we are thinking ahead of where we want to be in this space.
That's what I started with.
Yeah.
In this
that we talk about, what is it, strategic autonomy and all that.
Yeah.
So what will it take?
Strategic autonomy is I can do what I want to do at any time in whatever manner I want to. That's strategic autonomy.
But you, are you working towards that, increasing your
This is despotism. That's not strategic autonomy.
I think the comprehensive or the so-called strategic partnerships and the treaties are directed towards that, or a response to, response to this kind of changing environment, at least on the trade and the comprehensive sides. So that's the response I noticed in the last 2-3 years, because the world multilateralism has completely shattered and it's just complete standstill. So bilateral, or maybe trilateral, or plurilateral as it's called. Those
the
kind
middle
of
power.
comprehensive.
How do you describe it? The
They're
Canadian.
called strategic partnerships. Some of them are called comprehensive economic partnerships, which are essentially trade. But like if you look at the one with UAE, it goes beyond, because they also allowed public procurement, opened it. That was one of the first ones, and I think subsequently that was extended to the one with Australia, if I'm not mistaken, and then maybe I think the one with the EU also has a provision, and the UK. So FTAs have been broadened that way, and because the government is a very big business giver of business all over the world.
But that's why people get attracted to India, with the huge
all
population,
huge market. Public procurement is a big business.
We overdo that. Let's always remind ourselves, we are about a $4 trillion economy.
Yes, of course.
In a world which is more like 110, 120 trillion economy. So that's the biggest reason why we should focus much more in our policies on exports. And if you can do well out there, you'll do well here.
Yeah, but exports is tough because...
You'll find all the skills will come about, the technology will come about, simply because firms are forced to be competitive, otherwise they die.
I agree.
Right. So, the Indian industry has not been forced to be competitive.
Environment.
Yes.
I mean, the investments that our private sector makes in things like R&D is negligible.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they haven't had to.
But they don't need to, no.
They've
not been pushed.
There's enough demand in the country.
They get enough protection, that's why.
If you want to remain competitive tomorrow in the emerging...
There are 1 or 2 houses, Sudipto, sorry for interrupting, there are 1 or 2 houses, industrial houses, who do, I will not name them, but they are also good exporters. They do R&D.
National champions by and large, or those described as national champions,
no,
are deeply focused domestically.
No.
I won't name them.
Look, I won't name them.
We all know who you're talking about.
Yes, no. They are actually very good and frontier thing, but very good, sizable export presence. Okay. And so, that only buttresses or supports what I've been saying, that you force your industry to be competitive, force it to, don't give it protection.
The
rest will follow.
Well,
so
that's the bright side of depreciation. Right. It makes export more profitable.
Correct.
We have a lot to learn from the institutions. They did it.
Yes.
They also protected the people, but at the right time said, now you compete and you know,
That's true, that's
and that forced them to get technology, to develop their own skills and technologies. Things get embedded.
In the end, India is in a sweet position provided we are able to exploit the opportunity we have. We have the market, we have the human resource, we have countries wanting to invest here, but we are not creating the right environment for that to happen. And we are not allowing India to be competitive in the world, is what in fact is the reality. And
Well, that's only if you do a lot of policy changes.
that requires a lot of
So
policy change.
You know,
So
bit,
let's hope that happens. I purposely broadened the discussion because you could have, you know, discussed only the fisc, and we could have discussed only certain issues. But I think viewers want to know what is the large macroeconomic, situation that prevails in our country, and how we wish to move forward. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.